Hi there, and thanks for tuning in to the Black Employee channel. My name is Jordan Barry, and I'm a sales professional. I'm the chair of a Black Employee network in the tech space, and last but not least, I'm the host of this podcast. The Black Employee channel is a podcast made by the Black community for the Black community, and for our non-Black friends and allies who simply wish to be part of the conversation. So, whether we're discussing career development, all the way to health, or whether we're tackling the world of dating, to financial maturity, I am privileged to be joined by some amazing guests across the space to hold conversations that are unsullied by corporate guidelines. We want to be fun, we want to be informative, we're going to keep it real, and we're going to educate for the benefit of us all. So, tune in and buckle up. Today, I'm joined by the amazing trio of Black women in front of me across the tech space, all affiliated with their respective Black employee networks. Let's get a chance to know them. So first of all, we have Dawn. Hi, Dawn.
Hi, I'm Dawn
How's it going?
Osborne. Yeah, really good. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to the podcast. I'm Dawn Osborne. I am founder and chair of Adobe's Black Employee Network, and we've been established for about 2 years now. And I've been at Adobe 18 years, various roles across the business, but now settled as a EA to the VP of International Marketing. I founded the network 2 years ago because of an article I read about Black young men not achieving what the same job as their peers, even if they came from the most affluent backgrounds. And I've adopted my little boy, and I wanted to do the best for him. And I thought that adopting him and giving him the best start in life would be enough. But when I saw those stats, it made me realize that I needed to do more. And of course, I'm already in the corporate arena, so it's the best place to actually impact change and move the needle. For me, it's very easy to do that. So, that's me.
Thank you, Dawn. You are inspiration to us most and a veteran in the game. You've been at Adobe longer than I've probably been alive. I forgot my age, my birthday, and I've already forgotten.
That's an exaggeration, and I'm not that old. Thank you very much.
No. Sorry about
Thank
that. Let's move on quickly, shall we? Before I get myself into more trouble. Aisha, do you want to introduce yourself? Cut a quick 16-bar intro.
Sure. So I'm Aisha Suleiman. I am the chair and founder of a Black employee network at a tech company. If you really want to know which one, you can check me out on LinkedIn. But we focus on 3 things. So how we can support young people with the hiring process of the company, developing current employees through different initiatives like workshops, tackling subjects they have actually asked for, and engaging current employees through networking events. I also am the founder of The World in Her Words. So The World in Her Words is a platform that aims to inspire women to curate their careers, cultivate confidence, and build balanced relationships through stories.
It's awesome. God, I feel privileged to be on this call so far, and I haven't even got to the third guest. So last but not least, Ramat, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience and to people listening out there?
Yeah, hi, my name's Ramat Tijani. I work in the tech space alongside Aisha. I am part of the Ben board and look after the personal development stream. I am very passionate about education. I think it's something that no one else can take away from you. And so I'm keen for everybody to really look at what they can learn in terms of their personal development, essentially. So outside of work, I run the Inspiration Box, and that is a space providing people with opportunities to find inspiration in others. So I'm trying to inspire possibilities in people, because I reckon you can get inspiration from just about anyone. Everyone's got a story to share, and I'm here to share those stories with people. That's me in a nutshell.
Legit. Thank you for the introduction from the 3 of you. So, ladies, today, part of this conversation that we're having.
Are you going
Hang
to
on.
introduce
What about
yourself?
you?
We need to know a bit
Oh,
more
so you
about
want me to
you.
introduce myself?
You have
Yeah.
You want me
Yeah.
to embarrass myself
to.
in
Who
front of
are
these people?
you?
All of you have accomplishments, and then there's me. It's like, okay, here we go.
Oh,
Cut it.
please.
So,
Please.
so I'm Jordan. I'm the host of the Black Employee channel, as I've recently just introduced myself as. But apart from that, I'm also an Adobe employee. Within Adobe, I am a sales consultant. But more importantly to me and more relevant to this conversation is I am the co-chair. I am the 1A to Dawn's 1 of the Black Employee Network. So I'm here to support not only Dawn, but the Black community and Black employees within the UK to get into the tech space, to feel included in the tech space, and to offer opportunities for more in the future. So that's what I do. And this is why this podcast was created, right? We all have a shared investment into the tech space and to the Black community. And we really wanted to share our experiences, offer honest insight. And I think this is a great time for us to do it. So on that note, thank you for butting in and letting me introduce myself. You know, sometimes you just have to sit back and let other people talk, but I'm going to say something about myself sometimes. But today, I wanted to talk about within the Black culture, mental health. It is something that affects us heavily. You know, I'm looking at the mental health org website, and it says that detention rates under the Mental Health Act during 2017 and 18 were 4 times higher for people who are Black British group than those who are associated in the white group. Now that's quite a big thing, right? It's something that we have to focus on, we have to address. And interesting enough, Ramat, you and the Inspiration Box actually did a podcast around this. So why don't you just give us an insight into, you know, kind of the subjects you touched on your own podcast and elaborate to us all what the conversation was?
Yeah, so I've been on a bit of a journey with creating the Inspiration Box, and, we all have our own life journeys, and I thought that it would be a great outlet to use a podcast as a platform to share my journey with people. I think that we don't just go through life, we actually grow through life. We grow through all the ups and downs. And so the podcast is called Growing Through Life. So I think it was, I looked up at what was coming up, and it seemed that in the US they was looking at May to be the month for mental health awareness, and in the UK we had a week for Mental Health Awareness Week. And I thought, not many people know that I have a therapist, and not that they need to know. It's not like their business. I'm not here to hold a placard saying, hey, therapist go here. But at the same time, I think a lot of people do see me as quite a strong, confident Black woman. And I needed people to recognize that I don't do that on my own. I do that because I have the support network of friends and family, but at the moment, most importantly, I think, a therapist that I get to see every week, essentially. And it was funny that I came across a phrase the other day, which essentially said, people that go to therapy to deal with the people in their lives that don't go to therapy. And I was like, yeah, let me sip my tea there, because I have a few people in my life that could deal with therapy that would never go to therapy. And so I am going to talk to my therapist about them. But no, in all seriousness, I think that I use the podcast as a chance to just talk about it and talk about my journey into therapy and why I think it's actually something that we should all explore. It does bother me that entry into therapy can be a bit expensive. It depends on, I'm of a privileged background in that I can afford to go to therapy, and not everybody can. But I think it's important that we even have that conversation to let people know that people are going to therapy. They're not doing it all on their own.
Interesting. I mean, you mentioned that people are going to therapy. I mean, I'd like to open up this conversation and for others to share their experiences, whether they go to therapy. I mean, just from my personal point of view, I've never really looked at therapy until a recent date. It's quite convenient we spoke about this. You know, I never saw the need to. I always thought I was a strong, independent man who didn't need no help from no therapist. But And usually there's a negative stigma. Usually you go to therapy if you think there's something majorly wrong with you. But in reality, it's to make you a better person from my perspective. I know I'm not perfect and I want to improve those. And part of the reason why I said maybe I should pick up the call, pick up the phone and speak to a therapist is because I don't know what I could be and my potential with help. I've got where I am so far without help. I've done what I need to do, but I could be so much better person. I could have been, a black British Prime Minister. I could have been the Obama of the UK. I think I'm going a bit over the top there, but you don't know your true abilities unless you've unlocked them. So enough about me. I mean, Aisha, what about yourself? Are you someone who seeks therapy?
Yeah, I have a therapist as well. So when you said you could have been the Obama of the UK, I actually did a post on the World in Awards on 3 reasons to try therapy. So I talked about my experience, and when I did a post on LinkedIn, I was saying I wish I had gone sooner because by now I would have built my all-female army and I would have taken over the world by now. But yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I've been in therapy for over a year, and I've actually had a really good experience with my counselor. So, before therapy, so similar to what you just talked about, I sort of thought, it's not really like a black people thing. So I wasn't really sure. I was also thinking like my issues weren't that bad. I should just sort of suck it up, be a strong black woman and like figure things out. So for me, it was just after I turned 25, and I feel like I was having a quarter life crisis. And I actually looked it up. When you turn after 25, that age, what do they call it? There was a name for it, but there is actually a crisis for that age. Around that 25 age, you start feeling like, ooh, what's happening? What's wrong with me? You sort of start feeling lost, and then you feel like because you're approaching 30, you should have like your life all figured out and stuff. So yeah, I thought I would try therapy. I'm really glad that I tried it. Honestly, I could say it's like probably top 5 best things I've ever done in my life. And just got to uncover a lot of my baggage. So even things that I didn't know that were there. So that's the weird thing. You just like be in like different sessions, or maybe you're journaling or something like that, and then all of a sudden you have this sudden realization about why this particular behavior that you have, where it comes from, like in your childhood. So yeah, and then even things like really getting to know yourself. So I felt like I knew myself a little bit, but then when I went to therapy, I felt like I knew myself even more. So like when you're doing particular things or you don't like particular things, but you're not really sure why, that was kind of reinforced for me in therapy. So things like, what are my non-negotiables? And also what's acceptable to me, like in the way that people treat me. And also why, because once you're aware of why you don't like certain behaviors, when you see it, you're less likely to sort of let it slide, and you're more likely to stick up for yourself. And then your
Set
coping
those
tools.
boundaries. Set those
Yes,
boundaries.
those
Mhm.
boundaries. Because yes, adulting is people testing your boundaries and you just like reminding them. And if they keep pushing it, cutting them off. That's adulting.
Yeah.
I haven't quite
um,
mastered adulting yet. I can tell you that one for a fact. No
oh,
chance.
yeah, okay. Oh, okay.
You'll get there. You'll get there. It takes time. It
I'll
takes
get
time.
there. Hopefully, with counselling and therapy, I'll be an adult. I'll be a real adult one day. But for now,
Yeah.
I'm on this journey. I know, right?
Yeah, but even things like coping tools as well. I don't know, maybe Rama, you've had the same experience. So your coping tools, so what are the things that you need to do when you're like down or you're sad? Because often when you're down or sad, your instinct is to go and like, oh, I'm gonna hide in my bed, or just not speak to anyone and stuff like that. But knowing like what actually makes you happy and remembering to sort of do those things so that you don't spiral and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, for me, therapy has been awesome.
Awesome. And yeah, I going back on one of your points, definitely quarter life crises do exist, and that's certainly what triggered mine. I
Yeah.
am I'm just a huge man child, confused as to what is going on. I think that was one of the triggers. Um, I mean, Dawn, I want to open this up to you because Dawn, you've been quiet in the corner, but you've got a bit of a secret to tell, don't you? When we're on the topic of therapy, I mean, shall I break it or shall you?
But it's not really a secret. I mean, This
it
is,
is to the people who've just joined the podcast.
yeah, absolutely. About 10 years ago, I started studying to become a counsellor and psychotherapist. So I am a qualified counsellor and psychotherapist. I no longer practice, so it was a long time ago, and you absolutely have to keep your hours up and your membership's up to keep that going. But I was just thinking, how old was I when I had that? Because I felt like I was having a midlife crisis at that time. When I started my training, I was like, what am I doing? Where's my life going? And, I tried to look at the things and think about the things that I was good at, helping people, supporting, listening, all of those things. So I was like, okay, I know I can be a counselor. Wow. It's a really, really hard thing to do, by the way. I thought it was going to be easy. Not so. So I did my training.
Sorry to interrupt. So how old did you say you were at that time? How old did you say you were?
It was about 10 years ago. So what, are you asking my age? So
you would have been 15 then.
I'm 50 now. I'm 50 now. So I was around
15. I said 15. We'll edit that part out. You don't look at the 25.
I've said it's 10 years ago. Yes. So it's a long time. So every few years, you have your midlife crisis or crisis. Don't know. So I think it's a really wonderful thing to do, because as part of my training, I had to have counselling throughout my training. So for 2 years I had a counsellor, and also you have supervision as well. So you see clients and then you get support on those clients as well. It was a great time for me to really explore, because as a counsellor you have to know yourself like really well, and the training leans into that as well. There is a lot of challenging, a lot of introspection, and a lot of really trying to be present and trying to accept yourself as you are, so you can kind of then hold the other person in whatever place they're in. If you're not in that sturdy, strong, stable place, you cannot support another person. The other person's going to walk in the room and think, I could crush you. No, forget it. I'm gone. So lots of introspection, and it was really, I know, a bit harsh, but really, really good time. And I would recommend it to everybody as an external support, because I feel like, yes, you've got your family and friends and they're wonderful, but to have an independent person in your life who looks at your life from the outside and really gives you that insight and challenges you as well obviously in a kind, empathic way, to do better, or to change it, to think about what you do, how you treat people, how other people treat you. It's such a valuable thing. So I would recommend it to everybody, and I really enjoyed my training, but it couldn't continue. I was working at Adobe at the time I did my training. It was just one of those things, but I would recommend it for sure.
Yeah, that's insightful, Dawn. You're on a roll with that answer. And you know what? I don't want to stop you. So you've just given that explanation, and you said that you would advise everyone and you encourage many people to go to support, and we kind of have touched on this, but why, for the Black community, from your experience and from your expertise, do we not seek counselling, and do we not think it's the right thing to do?
I don't know do we really feel like that? I think some of it might be generational. I know that my parents would, hell no, be going anywhere near a counsellor, and actually we had to drag my dad kicking and screaming. When my mum passed away, he had bereavement counselling, and it was really lovely. Someone came to the house, he had 6 weeks of counselling, and, it was a really good thing for him. I don't know if he really embraced it fully. He's 80 plus. It's really challenging. It's really difficult. But, it might be a generational thing, and the people that I still, keep in contact with who are still counsellors say that the younger generation do access it in education. There's, most schools have school counselors, and they go to counseling with those organizations and with universities as well. So I don't know if that's true. I don't have any data to put behind it. But one thing that, I do think is, if the numbers are low, maybe my theory is that there's a lack of empathy anyway to Black people when it comes to medical issues as a whole. When you look at the mortality rate for, mums who give birth, do you know what I mean? And other things, when you think about COVID, there is this, the speed of diagnosis, the amount of appointments you have to attend to actually be heard. And I wonder whether that's something to do with it, whether if somebody does present, and both, Rama and Aisha have said, I'm a strong Black woman. You've said, Jordan, I'm a strong Black man. And isn't that the thing? People think that you're this strong person. So if you go into a doctor's surgery and say, I'm really struggling, they're like, oh, oh, she doesn't need anything, or he doesn't need something. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think there's a slowness to prescribe certain solutions for us as a Black people. But that's a massive side. That's my personal opinion. But I think it's a relevant thing. So I think we would access services more if the doors were open.
And what does everyone else feel? I mean, personal opinions is why we have this podcast, right? We want to hear everyone's opinions. So, Aisha, Rama, open up.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I also think that, my first experience with a therapist was actually at university, when I was doing my master's, and, she was great. I was just like, oh, you exist? Okay, cool. Like, let's talk. And it was great. But I think there's a stigma in our society almost around what going to therapy means and the type of people that need to go to therapy. So if you're going to a therapist, what's wrong with you? Like, why do you need to see someone? Like, you're not mad. You don't look mad. You don't sound mad. What does mad even mean? Why are you talking to a stranger about your personal things? These are things that happen behind closed doors. You shouldn't share that with a stranger. Those sort of things. Like, and in some of our languages, there isn't even a term for like mental health. There's, like, that term doesn't even exist in some of the languages that we speak. So, how can you even explain it to people? Like, this is what we're doing. For me, mental health and like going to see a therapist, it's like going to the gym for your mind. Like, you have to exercise that muscle every single time continuously in order to benefit from it. But I think culturally there's a massive stigma around what it means to be that person, to walk into the doors of a therapist. So yeah, I think that's part of the problem. Like, and I agree with Dawn completely about the generational thing. I think like some of my uncles, if I was to tell them, oh, I'm going to see a therapist, what therapist? Come pay me.
Exactly.
I'll therapist you. And I'll be like, this is why I need a therapist, babe, because clearly you can't therapist me. So yeah, like, I think there's some generational issues, like understanding things there that we need to kind of tackle. But yeah, we'll see how it all pans out. Aisha, what do you think?
I feel like the strong Black person thing. So you know how we've all sort of said that we see ourselves as strong people. I think that works against us because sometimes we don't realize when something is wrong, right? So
Yeah.
one thing I always say is the adult version of, depression often manifests itself as the person telling you a lot of the time, oh, I'm really tired. I'm really tired. I'm really tired. If you have a friend that keeps telling you they're really tired and you can always see it, like, just check in on them because they could be dealing with depression and not even know it. So I think that often, because we see ourselves as strong people and we should just keep going because we've had to deal with so much, that works against us because then we don't realize when there is a problem. So to Rama's point earlier, the quote about, going to therapy for people that don't want to go to therapy. There are a lot of people like that do need the help, but they don't actually even know it or they don't realize it or they think it needs to be like really, really severe in the way that it manifests itself. Like, you have baggage, you have abandonment issues, You have trust issues, you have all kinds of issues, but you're like, no, I'm great, I'm fine. No, you're not. You're actually not. So I think that that also works against us in us not knowing that we need the help. And I think that makes people sort of hesitate. There's also still a lot of superstition as well. So especially like I'll speak in terms of being Nigerian, if you have, any sort of mental health problems, it's like, no, you just need to pray, it's demons. Your enemies are after you. Somebody has done juju for you.
Your enemies are praying for you.
So
Great
you
insight
just
to
need
the
to
FD
pray.
culture there from a Western point of view. Thank you very much. Thank you for that one.
It's like,
Learning more and more every day.
it's like,
Can I
yeah, go on, John.
can I just add about something, Ramat, you said about the cost of it as well. For me, that's really big. It's really, really expensive obviously you can access counselling through the NHS, absolutely, long waiting lists, etc. But if you go private, it's a lot of money, and that may be also something that is a barrier to accessing,
Without a doubt.
counselling and getting help.
Without a doubt. I think
mean-
when we look at it, obviously, not obviously, but the data states that as a black person, you're going to earn less money. That's just a fact. Like the ethnic pay gap is real. So when we take that into consideration and you think, okay, maybe you decide I'm going to invest in myself and I'm going to invest in my health and I am going to pay for these services, you may have no clue just how expensive these services are. But I think we were discussing it before, and Aisha was saying that, if you are in that position, do always ask the therapist that you may want to use if they provide some sort of discount or if they are able to work within the budget that you have. Not everyone will be able to, but some will. And if you don't ask, you don't get. And that comes with everything in life, not just therapy. But for this particular conversation, like, please do look at the resources out there. And if you find a therapist that you really, really want to work with, then just reach out, just ask. You never know. If they can't help you, they may know someone else that can help you. So I'm a massive advocate when it comes to therapy. I know it's expensive. I know it's not accessible to everyone. And I speak from a privileged place in that I can't afford it at the moment. But, definitely look at what you can do to get there, essentially, if you feel like it's something that you need. And I feel like it's something everyone needs. So, yeah.
The other thing as well is examining, where you're spending your money. Because I'm not being funny. Like, I know people that will go out drinking, probably spend like £100 a week on drinking. But then when you talk to them about therapy, they're like, oh no, I can't afford it. Well, you could if you just cut down on your drinking.
I should, in fairness, and I'd like to butt in here.
Jordan.
Drinking is not therapy. That was a mindset, right? I mean, so from my perspective, and I'm just being a bit just ignore it. Drinking was one of those things where you it was a good way to ignore things and forget things, right? Moving on to the next point, and I think this is quite a relevant part of the conversation to move on, is, for me, I didn't seek a therapist because typically going out drinking and crying on your friend's shoulder was a way of therapy, right? And, going back to your friends, that most people go to therapy because of people around them who need therapy. So I think the reason why in the black culture a lot of individuals don't seek counselling is because they're trying to leverage their friends. They're trying to put the pressure on their friends to get therapy. It's free, it's cheap, right? You don't need to go to professional. You can just, kind of place all your frustrations on someone else. And I assume everyone has a point of view that that's probably not the right thing to do, right? I mean, who's going to press on that topic? That is a friend a therapist?
There's a place for friendships, and it's a really important thing to have a network and somebody to reach out to when you need them, rather than having to wait 1 week for a therapy session. You've got somebody accessible, but friendship and a therapeutic relationship are very, very different. And your friends will soothe you, they'll sympathize rather than empathize. And there's a difference in the dynamic. And you get more, well, you don't get more value, but there is a lot of value in the therapeutic relationship and what they can draw out of you and how you can, break the vicious cycle of your life. Because sometimes you're in this pattern, and your friends are in the pattern as well. They're like, oh yeah, it'll get better. Don't worry about it. Oh, they said the wrong thing. You need somebody to tell you the truth. And sometimes that's your therapist.
Someone to throw cold water on you and be like, whoa, sorry, okay, thank you, but no thank you. The amount of times I tell my therapist, I didn't ask for your opinion on that, but I value your opinion on that, so I will take note and maybe do something about it. Many, because, my therapist tells me real truths that I want to hear. I don't need to hear it. I don't need you to hold that mirror up in my face and be like, Ramat, this is exactly what you look like. This is exactly what you're saying. And I think when it comes to it, like you said, Dawn, our friends are often there to sympathize with us rather than to empathize. And I think, for those of us that have friends that do empathize, I'm one of those friends that I'm your empathy queen. I call myself a realistic optimist because I think everything is great, but I'm going to tell you when you're wrong because ultimately, you can't get through life without it. So yeah. I am one of those friends that happens to be a bit of a therapist, essentially, to my friends. But what I've had to learn is the importance of boundaries and the importance of saying, actually, right now, I can't deal with that. Or right now, I'm dealing with myself. And also not feel the need to apologize. I used to be, I still am. I think I kind of am working on it. But I used to basically be a people pleaser. I want to make the world happy. I want to make everyone around me happy. That's just in my innate personality. But I can't do that. It's broken my back. I'm not here to have broken back. I want to walk straight. So therefore, I can't be doing that all the time. So yeah, I think there's a fine line, and you've just got to find that balance where you can put your boundaries in and be like, actually, not today, babe.
Yeah, and I think what's important is you may not always get the right answer from your friend. Same with you, Matt. Loads of people come to me for advice and come to me as their counsellor, and I don't have a professional understanding of things, so I could be telling people straight out the wrong thing. I mean, my friends come to me about relationship advice. I'm like, my friend, have you not seen my history? I'm not the person to speak to about relationship advice. I'm just going to make it worse. Go and seek professional help before we both end up going into the wrong path. So I think it is crucial that you kind of avoid your friends and go to the right therapist. But in that regard, sometimes it's hard to open up to a therapist. Do you think it's important to find the right therapist that you can relate to?
I do. From personal experience, I do. I have to say yes. And that is not an easy task to find the right person that you connect with. And a good therapeutic relationship should transcend color as well. So, I mean, that's maybe cracking something else open, whether you should have a black therapist if you're black. I don't necessarily think so. But yeah, finding the right therapist is really hard. You've got to do your research, and there are so many out there. There are so many out there. And sometimes it really just is a personality fit. It's tough. Yeah. I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, I definitely think it's important. My therapist is white, and she's awesome. But yeah, you definitely do need to feel like you connect with them and that you trust them. Because if you don't trust them, then you won't be able to tell them some stuff. But that's sort of built over time. So it's important to actually try different therapists as well. That's also completely fine. You can sort of shop around until you find someone that you connect with. But just on the friendship points, I didn't touch on that. One thing I wanted to say is, in terms of not making your friends act as your therapist, sometimes your friends aren't actually able to deal with some of the stuff you're going through because they might actually be going through their own stuff as well. And the other thing is sometimes your friends might be the problem, right? So they may have their own negative beliefs and their own self-limiting beliefs. And then they reinforce it to you. So like when you come to them complaining about, here I go again, this cycle, I'm repeating it. They sort of reinforce it to you. Maybe they'll say, oh, that's just how life is, and they join in with you and they just basically feed into the misery. But then, when you have a therapist, they can help you to see some of those limiting beliefs as well. And what might happen is you might then start to see some of your friends differently, and then you might have to drop them. But yeah, that's something that happens as well.
Facts only. Facts only.
You cold-blooded, but it's a valid point. Cold-blooded, but valid.
Love it.
Damn.
Love it.
It's
Love it.
fact
I'm staying a bit side out there.
Preach it.
Yeah.
I'm staying a
Couldn't
bit side
agree
from
more.
that one.
I was going to say,
Rama.
like, when it comes to finding a therapist, man, listen, basically, I'm in a long-term relationship, so I haven't been dating for a long time, so I don't know what that dating life is like right now. But basically, for me, finding a therapist is like dating. You need to find the right fit. So it's okay for you to go to a therapist, maybe do a session or so, and be like, actually, this isn't going to work. I, for example, when I had my first therapist in university, she was a white lady and she was great. Absolutely loved her. She made me definitely realize the value in therapy. More recently, like when I started therapy again last year, the first person that I had was the first person I was given was a guy. When I spoke to him, he was rude on the phone, and I was like, "We're never gonna work. This is not gonna happen. Sorry." So I didn't even go to session 1 with him. Fine. The next person that I had was a middle-aged white lady, and in the first session, within about 30 minutes, she said something which made me think, now hold up. You can't judge me based on the information I've just given you. You're my therapist. You can't give me past judgment on my life like this. You need to pause. And I internalized it, went home, thought about it. And then when I came back the following week, I was like, so before we start, I want to give you a score. If I was to score your therapy session from last week, I would have given you a 6 out of 10. And I know you don't need a scoring, but I'm going to give you that scoring because I want us to have an honest relationship. You judged me, and I didn't think that was fair. And here's what you said, and here's how I felt about it. And she was like, okay, that's definitely not how it meant to come across. And I was like, you know what, like intentions or not, that's how I felt. So I'm letting you know because I need us to be able to have a good relationship. If I can trust you and tell you anything as my therapist. So we continued for 2 or 3 more sessions, and I just realized it's just not going to work. So I went back to the guys that were providing me like with the different therapists, and I said to them, look, I need a black woman because none of this is working. I don't have time to be explaining cultural differences to people or whatever it is. I need a black woman. They gave me a black man. I was unimpressed. I was like, I need a black man. I didn't assume it, but I Googled him. I was like, yeah, okay, cool. And I looked at it, I was like, listen, I need a woman who. But I thought, let me give it a chance. Like, I'm using my unconscious bias is coming in to play here, and that's not fair. So let me try it. And you know what? Uncle's been my therapist for over a year, and me and Uncle get on real well. So I obviously don't call him Uncle because he tells me to call him by his name because he's my therapist. We get on really well, and I don't think I ever would have imagined that I'd be talking to this older guy who's probably closer to my dad's age about the things that I'm going through, and he'd be able to give me a perspective that makes sense. But he has been, and it's been a really good fit. So I think don't knock people when you're looking for your therapist. Don't knock the first person that you come across, and don't make assumptions. I assumed that, this uncle was going to be the wrong fit. But listen, he's a gem. I'm like, yep, let's go. Let's go, therapy. Let's go.
Rama, I really wanted to say and address the fact that, the comparison between dating and finding a therapist was great until you mentioned that you ended up with the wrong gender. I was so on board. And then it's kind of, so you asked for one, you got another. That's where the kind of dating comparison changed. But, it's 21st century, so,
you have an open mind when it comes to dating.
Open mind, and that's what I was trying to relate.
We'll help you. We need to do a podcast on dating.
I was talking about the process, okay? I wasn't talking about the gender here. I was just talking about processes, but
I know.
Yeah, guys, it's all good. It all worked out, okay? I'm happy
I had
with
to
in
add
my
some
relationship.
satire into that. Yeah. But just to close down the discussion, I don't think we should be doing a conversation or a podcast around dating.
We
If
should.
so, you probably need a new host because I, as I said, probably offer the worst advice and the worst experiences for a conversation. We'll sub
Never
me
say
out for
never.
that one.
Never say never.
But that's why
That
it
is
would
the
be
motto
so
of my dating
great.
life.
You can start the conversation telling everyone to do the opposite of whatever you say.
You know what? That might be the best therapy I can give someone. Possibly the best therapy. So look, I mean, this has been a really interesting conversation. I think we've really explored the avenues of therapy and, you know, kind of the value it brings to black individuals in particular. But we're talking from a perspective, and let's just check ourselves here, right? We mentioned this in the conversation that, you know, therapy has a cost to it. Maybe a bit too many zeros on the end of some of their hourly rates, to be honest with you. And it may not be accessible to all. You know, we're all in a very privileged position. We all are employed and employed by great companies that look after our well-being. So we might have well-being packages that support it, but regardless, our salaries typically we are able to do so. But some people aren't in the same position. And I just wanted to bring up this statement and fact from Mental Health Org once again that even when employed, men and women from some ethnic groups are less paid on average than those from other groups with similar qualifications and experiences. Now, they've said some ethnic groups, but I can 100% say that that applies to black individuals. So, you know, they are facing a lot more stress. They are still going under the same stress as other individuals in the workplace, but they aren't given the same resources because they may be unfairly paid. So how can we help those individuals that need help, possibly more than we may, get the support and get access to the resources they need? Does anyone have any advice for those individuals out there?
There are lots
So
of organisations and charities that do support the community. That would be the first point of call. Going to your GP is the first point of call as well, because the NHS does offer, 6 sessions of CBT. So yeah, I would start there. But then, as Ramat said, you can also negotiate as well if you find someone that you want to work with. Try and get the price down. But it's a tough thing, and like I said earlier, I think it's a barrier.
yeah,
Sorry, Aisha.
definitely. No problem. I think one thing I was going to say, so when I was doing a bit of research for the article I wrote, so there are some organizations that offer low cost counseling, so for like £5 per session. But I think those are often limited, but you can look those up online as well. So they cover like different parts of London and so on. But as Dawn has said, NHS is always the first port of call. The other thing is through your organization. So a lot of people aren't actually aware that their organization may offer some free counseling sessions. So always, if you are in employment, always check with your organization first, because normally they might offer you some sessions for free, and then you can then go on to explore long-term options.
Yeah, and I guess I'd also add that there are some apps that exist that allow you to book some sessions with therapists. So they're the entry point is a lot lower. So it might be that, a session is maybe £25 an hour, as opposed to it being £100 an hour. So there are some apps out there, and I know that the wellbeing space is one in which there is a lot of technological advances, and there are a lot of people doing things to try and bridge that gap when it comes to being able to provide services and almost like matchmaking services between users that want to access mental health services and mental health professionals that are available to give their advice. So I think definitely it might be a bit harder to do the work, but it's work that is definitely worth doing, and you'll definitely reap the benefits of. The other thing that I would say, and this isn't even official advice, but this is my own personal opinion on life, but there are some people that you guys are following on Instagram that you don't need to be following. There are some other people that are on Instagram that you do need to be following. So, think about your consumption of what it is you're taking into your space and your mind. Like, just think about who you want to follow. But there are certain therapists, for example, that are online that have like great following, but forget the following. They just have great messages that they are sharing. So on the podcast, the Growing Through Life podcast, I mentioned a few that I follow. One being Nadra Tawwab. She's a Black therapist. She's based in the US, but she's all about boundaries. And I think for a lot of us as Black people, I think boundaries is a massive thing. It's something that we need to work on. Why are you laughing? Why are you laughing?
Yeah, 100%.
It's true.
It's true, right? It's so true. Like, the boundaries is one of those things. So she specializes in boundaries. So I would say definitely look at her. And then there are a few others that I mentioned in the podcast, but also just limit who you're listening to online. Like, you do not need to listen to people. And for certain platforms, so I'm a marketing strategist by day. There's certain platforms you can mute people. Like, if you don't want to unfollow your friend because you think your friend is going to feel away, you can mute them. There's ways in which you can do these things that your friend doesn't need to even know that you've muted them, So just put yourself front and center of your mental health, because you are the most important thing. You can't give to others if you aren't for yourself. And that's where I drop the mic.
Yeah, and I just want to close on the fact that you kind of tied in the impact of social media and your mental health. It is affecting us heavily, right? For me, I've questioned my mental health recently because of the social media. Of course, I think it's only right towards the end we address the fact that, it has been traumatic for Black individuals. We've witnessed another act of George Floyd in this unfortunate times. And to most of us, we are watching videos, we are seeing, kind of heinous comments on things on social media. And sometimes it's good just to step away because it does get to you. For me in particular, it got to me, constantly seeing videos, constantly seeing trolls. And I must admit, I am one of those trolls, just not when it comes to racism. I like to troll about many other things, but it does impact you. And then sometimes taking a step away, clearing your head and avoiding some social media channels is imperative to our own health. And if you have been affected, follow the guidelines and advice that we've just given. Take up help. I think you guys have done a great job of outlaying the different paths to get help, regardless of where area you're from, of privilege, no matter what. There's help available to you, so go out and seek it. I think we've nailed that, guys. What do you think?